This week we're taking another dive into the ancient past of Cybertron for a look at the story behind another of the legendary Primes. The Lord of Lies and Master of Deception, LIEGE MAXIMO. The LIEGE MAXIMO was an original character created by writer Simon Furman and artist Jeff Sr. for Marvel's Transformers Generation 2 comic book. Appearing only on the final page of the final issue in 1994, the LIEGE MAXIMO was the monstrous leader of the series' villains, the Cybertronian Empire, an offshoot faction of Decepticons who had been traveling the galaxy turning other planets into replicas of Cybertron. He claimed to be the ancestor of all Decepticons, who had been created at the same time as the first Autobot Prime, a force for darkness and evil that was the natural counterforce to the Autobots' goodness and light. With the series cancelled, the LIEGE MAXIMO remained a dangling mystery for several years, though Furman would mention the character again in stories he wrote for the official convention, BotCon, later in the decade. Eventually, he was able to resolve the mystery in a two-part prose story titled Alignment, published through the unofficial British convention Transforce between 2001 and 2002. This story explained that the LIEGE MAXIMO was one of the first generation of Transformers created by the God of Light, Primus, in the distant past. He was born with a hunger for power and desired nothing less than to become a god like his creator. These first Transformers reproduced by splitting their bodies like cells, dividing themselves over and over to create the rest of the Cybertronian race. But the Liege was unwilling to dilute his power by doing so, and instead retreated into hiding to plot for the future. He spawned only a few selective offspring, who spread throughout the Cybertronian race, tainting them with his evil, eventually leading to the birth of the Decepticons. Millions of years later, after Optimus Prime and Megatron left Cybertron, a group of Decepticons remaining on the planet rediscovered this long-forgotten process of reproduction, and spawned a new generation of unfeeling, amoral Cybertronians. At the LIEGE MAXIMO's command, these Transformers began cyberforming other planets to build the Hub, a resonating web of metal worlds that would allow the Liege to pierce the fabric of reality and ascend to a higher plane of existence. But his plans to attain godhood were foiled by the allied forces of the Autobots and Decepticons, when the Dinobot Swoop destroyed a key portion of the hub just as the Liege was in the middle of ascending, collapsing the portal and obliterating him. Now, Alignment wasn't an official publication, so none of this was really canon. But when he wrote the 2004 guidebook, Transformers: The Ultimate Guide, Furman reaffirmed in its pages that the LIEGE MAXIMO was one of the first generation of Transformers, and further began to establish a new, completely different story surrounding these robots. The ideas introduced in the book were then further developed by Hasbro over the remainder of the decade to become the backbone of their new Aligned continuity, a unified modern vision for Transformers lore that debuted in 2010. In this version of their story, the first generation of Transformers consisted of 13 robots known as the Primes, created by Primus to help fight his evil brother, Unicron. LIEGE MAXIMO was the 11th of the group to be created, a master liar and calculating manipulator who could talk anyone into anything, armed with deadly poison darts. Where in Generation 2, LIEGE MAXIMO had been a title, his true name unknown, here it was his actual name, and his monstrous appearance from the comic was abandoned in favour of a new design based on Marvel Comics' god of lies and mischief, Loki. After the Primes defeated Unicron, LIEGE MAXIMO began plotting to take power for himself and schemed against his siblings, using his talent for deceit and manipulation to slowly, surreptitiously turn them against one another. In particular, he carefully stoked the anger and resentment of Megatronus, the outsider of the group, fostering a disagreement between him and Solus Prime, which eventually led to a rage-blinded Megatronus accidentally killing Solus. This new origin story formed the basis of Liege Maximo's various appearances over the rest of the decade, with each new story that he featured in putting its own spin on the events, each offering a different account of what became of him after his scheming was exposed following Solus's death. According to the 2011 novel Transformers Exiles, he fled into space, but was hunted down and imprisoned by Alchemist Prime. On the other hand, the 2014 guidebook The Covenant of Primus claimed that he had died in a fight with the other Primes, killed by a shot from Megatronus's Requiem blaster. Per this account, his body was buried on Cybertron, only to be exhumed millennia later by Megatron in the Transformers Prime animated series, who severed the corpse's arm and welded it to his body so that he could wield the power of a Prime. Then again, the 2015 Robots in Disguise book, The Trials of Optimus Prime, depicted a living Maximo residing with his siblings in the realm of the Primes outside of normal space and time, where he was at his most Loki-ish, a trickster interfering with the tests the Primes were putting Optimus Prime through for his own amusement. One thing that's been pretty consistent though, is that these modern stories have dropped Generation 2's idea of Liege Maximo being the force behind the creation of the Decepticons. Though you could say his role in the story means he still has an indirect hand in it, today that credit is instead generally given to Megatronus, who serves as either the founder or simply just the inspiration for Megatron and his followers. The story of Liege Maximo and the Primes was also adapted into the world of IDW Publishing's comic books between 2017 and 2018. In this universe, the Primes were merely the leaders of tribes on prehistoric Cybertron, and both Maximo and Megatronus were secretly the pawns of Shockwave, a Decepticon who had travelled back in time from the future, and who had orchestrated Maximo's manipulation of Megatronus and the death of Solus Prime. For his part in the crime, Maximo was exiled into space by the other Primes, imprisoned within the dormant body of his giant servant, the Titan Vigilem, and guarded by a crew of his own tribesmen who had turned against him. There he remained for millions of years until the present day, when the Autobot city speaker Windblade, unaware of the danger, awoke the sleeping Vigilem, allowing Maximo to escape. Reuniting with the scattered members of his tribe who had remained loyal to him, the Maximals, he launched a new attack on Cybertron, but soon met a messy end when he dared to cross RC. Though history has seen him elevated from an obscure, dangling plot thread to one of the most important figures in ancient Cybertronian lore, to date, the closest there's been to a Liege Maximo toy was a tiny Prime Master released in 2018's Power of the Primes toy line. According to the story of the toy line, this small robot contained Maximo's spark and could grant his power to other Transformers, a gimmick represented by the figure transforming into Spark Mode and plugging into the larger toys in the series. To shield its power from detection, the Prime Master concealed itself within a suit of armor based on the Decepticon Pretender, Skullgrin, which could transform into a clawed weapon that larger toys could hold. Who knows if we'll ever get a real toy of him? But the only thing that's certain where the Prime of Lies is concerned is that you can never be certain about anything. And those are the basics on Liege Maximo. If you've enjoyed this dive into Transformers lore, there's over 100 more videos where that came from, so subscribe and check them out. Plus you can get early access to new episodes if you support the show on Patreon.